So if you want to read comics, first and foremost, I'd say, well done. They're fucking awesome. But the questions I get the most about comic books come from new readers or people who are interested in the whole thing but don't know what to start reading. So I just thought I'd give a couple suggestions, describe them real quick, say what I like about them, and then throw you on your fucking merry way. Sound good? Good. So the books I want to look at today are Saga, which is a fairly grand and vulgar space opera. American Vampire, which is a generational spanning anthology of stories. And something called Planetary. Of the three, Planetary is the only one that is already concluded, so it's all done. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, so for people who aren't into jumping onto something that looks like it could go indefinitely, I'd say Planetary is definitely the one for you. So, let's talk real quick about Saga. Saga is an Image comic published monthly. It's written by Brian K. Vaughan and it's illustrated by Fiona Staples. It is heavily influenced by Star Wars. It is a big space opera. Essentially, it is the story of... It's the story of two lovers from opposite sides of warring parts of the galaxy. And they get together against impossible odds and have a child. And the book opens being narrated by their child Hazel, and it is galactic. The art is just stunning. The book takes so many chances and just challenges a lot of the ways that a comic is put together. It's beautiful. It's an Eisner Award winning comic book, which is a bit of a big deal in the comic book community. And actually, now that I think about it, all three books that I'm recommending here are Eisner Award winners. But it is fantastic. It is funny and touching. Brian K. Vaughan had the idea as a kid and then refined it when he became a parent. So it's written from a lot of different perspectives, but it still has that kind of childlike awesomeness in its scope. It's huge. At one point, the family gets together and has to find a spaceship to escape a planet where they're being hunted. And that's kind of the impetus for most of the story, is they are being hunted. They represent something from like a propaganda perspective that needs to be put down. Like these two sides can never get along and they want to keep the engendered kind of hatred and clear lines of distinction between those two races. And the fact that they got together and had a kid pissed a lot of people off. But it's epic in scope, but it's very human in its feel. The relationships are very real. I hate using the phrase because it usually gets misinterpreted, but there are strong women across the board written in this, both physically and emotionally, and it's just, there's strong women. They're complex characters. Women aren't just props. They are some of the best characters written in the book, and that's just something that I can totally get behind. Next on my list of recommendations is American Vampire, which is written by Scott Snyder, and the art is by Raphael Albuquerque. There's a mini-series with art by Dustin Nguyen, who's also amazing, but it's put out by the Vertigo imprint of DC, which has brought us such awesome books as Hellblazer and pretty sure Preacher, Hellblazer, Preacher, and Sandman, which are just three iconic staples of the genre. The cool thing about American Vampire, the first 5 issues have 2 stories apiece. One written by Scott Snyder, who is amazing. He's not revolutionizing, but he is currently on one of the best runs of Batman I've ever read. And it's kind of his brainchild. So the first 5 issues are, there's 2 stories, one by Scott Snyder, one by Stephen King, and then after those issues, Scott Snyder takes over as the sole writer. But I mean, like, this is the kind of series with the creativity and the, it had enough quality to it to bring Stephen King, one of my favorite American storytellers, into the fold, which I think says a lot. The art is spectacular. I mean, I'm such a sucker for art. A great story without something to catch my eye in comic books is just, I'd rather read the book. American Vampire chronicles the emergence of a brand new breed of vampires, and there are all kinds, which is a cool mythology to add to the whole story, is that there's Carpathian vampires, and then there's the Russians, and they all, like, there's all these different breeds of vampire that all have these different attributes. Like the Americans are faster and stronger and they can walk in sunlight, which makes them a big deal. In the original run of the story, like the kind of beginning arc of American Vampire, is the story of a guy named Skinner Sweet, who is just an absolute lunatic. And it's I think it's in the late 1800s that he emerges as the first American vampire. And it's basically, picture Sabretooth from the X-Men, like Wolverine's nemesis, mixed with Dracula, and that's what you get, is you get just bloodlust and insanity with no moral compass, plus the broody awesomeness that comes with just being a vampire. It's stunning to look at, and it actually does manage to induce an amount of, like, it's a good horror story as well as just being a good story, which is something that I really value. I recommend it, obviously. Next up is a story called Planetary, which is, like I said, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, so you can actually finish it, which is just very satisfying from a series. It's written by Warren Ellis, and the art is by John Cassaday, and John Cassaday delivers some of the most human and intimate art I've ever seen. Some of the characters are rendered with such, like, intimacy that it's actually off-putting and drags you so deeply into the book. Warren Ellis manages to write stories that sometimes it feels like he's just letting John Cassaday tell the story. Like, he gives him a basic idea and he's like, I want this to look awesome and I know you can, and then he does. It's, to give a brief synopsis, it's, there's a kind of corporation called Planetary that always has 4 members, and what you see in the first issue is a man named Elijah Snow being recruited into the fold. This is a man who's been alive since the turn of the 19th century. The 20th century, I should say. The turn of the 20th century, and there is a massive overarching conspiracy covering the entire book, but what makes it so cool is they call themselves archaeologists of the impossible. They uncover and they research and they catalog just the amazing and the out there and the awesome. It's like if superheroes met the X-Files, except it's also the story of... It takes the story of one of Marvel's premier superheroes, the idea, the kind of same genesis of that story, and instead of exploring what would happen to these people if they turned heroic, it explores what would happen if these 4 people with these crazy abilities go absolutely evil. And it closes in a way that is satisfying without being explosive or expository or like too climactic. It completely subverts where you think the story is going to go, and in the end you're completely fine with it. The characters are so well done. There's Elijah Snow, who can subtract heat from a room as well as produce cold. There's the drummer, who is a kid who was experimented on and rescued by Planetary and recruited into them, who can access any kind of data feed, and in some instances it means accessing data that's based more on energy. So in one kind of episode, feels like a TV show, he essentially communicates with the dead because it's nothing but data anyway. And then there's, I think her name is Jakarta, and she is just the most badass character. She's so grounded and stubborn and kick-ass while still just being like a complex character, which is something I love. And it's another, everything I've listed so far is an Eisner Award-winning comic book, and I recommend picking them up. They're nice, easy starts, and the best part of all 3 books is that none of them tie in heavily with anything else. So far, Saga is entirely self-contained, so all you need to do is buy issues 1 to when it finishes of Saga, and you'll have the whole story. Planetary is contained entirely within the issues of Planetary, and American Vampire happens exclusively in American Vampire. So those are easy to access while still being really thrilling reads, and they all bring something new to the table. One is very science fiction focused with a huge focus on almost an Indiana Jones-esque exploration of the world and a delight in what's weird and what's fucked up about Earth. And then you have one that just spans the universe itself and shows you places that you haven't seen before in a very Star Wars-esque feel, where you're brought into these new environments that feel very fleshed out, and they feel very lived in. And then American Vampire is another look back at like a possible past. So they're all spectacular books. I recommend them very highly. Planetary I've reread probably 5 or 6 times. The only reason I haven't reread all of American Vampire and Saga is that they're still running right now. So you can go and you can pick up the latest issue at a comic book shop, although I do recommend start at the beginning. Yeah, that's all I got.